Thank you very much to FlexiSpot for sponsoring today's video. FlexiSpot sent me this amazing standing desk, which many of you who have been watching my streams will have seen me raving about it. It's an E7 standing desk premium series, and it's an adjustable standing desk. But when I get tired, I can move the desk down and take a little seat down, as I'm going to move down with it. I don't have my chair ready for this. That's a bit too low. So it's really nice. You can go as low as you want, very, very high as well. It's a really, really nice feature to have a motorized desk. For me, it's perfect when I'm standing long hours, sitting long hours at my desk, either editing or now playing Lorcana. It's so nice to have that flexibility. You're probably thinking, I didn't even hear that desk move. Well, that's because the noise level is less than 50 decibels. One thing I love about this desk is how much space it has. I can fit on 2 different Disney Lorcana play mats, which is just great for me. I have one for my play space, and then I have another to put my mouse and my keyboard. It is just absolutely perfect for my needs. Some of the best features about this desk is the height range from 58 centimeters at the lowest, but 123 centimeters at the highest is great. I also love the fact that there's a very heavy load capacity. I have so much gear attached to this desk and it can handle it no problems. Another thing which I really appreciated was how easy it was to install. There was also a really handy YouTube video, which I'll have linked, which I watched, which was how to set up the desk, which FlexiSpot themselves made. But it was really, really easy to do. And a 7-year warranty is just absolutely great, meaning that you can be confident that this desk is going to be with you for a very long period of time. If you'd like to get a FlexiSpot desk just like mine, check out the link in the description. And there's also going to be an anniversary sale to celebrate FlexiSpot's 8th anniversary. Thank you so much, FlexiSpot, for sponsoring today's video. I absolutely love this desk. It is great. Welcome, everybody. We've got a big tournament that happened in Germany. It was a release event at Battle Bear, which is a very well-known establishment with lots of very good Disney Lorcana players. We're going to look at the top 8 decks, starting off with Amethyst Steel. Not too much new cards in this one. We've got Peak Games Referee, which is when you play this character, opponents can't play actions until the start of your next turn. This can be a really good way to disrupt things like Be Prepared, disrupt things like A Whole New World. Of course, when you're playing Pete with Amethyst, you have the potential of bouncing it back multiple times. It can also sing Friends on the other side. So I think Pete is a card which, before the release, everyone was like, wow, this card's absolutely bonkers. And I actually don't think it's as good as people think. But this is definitely a good home for it because you're able to bounce it and replay it multiple times and sing Friends. I think Pete's really good in this Amethyst Steel deck. The other new addition is 1 copy of Madam Mim Elephant. When you play this character, banish her or return another character to your hand. So it's just like a normal Madam Mim, but with bigger stats. But then the other ability is at the start of your turn, you may move up to 2 damage counters from this character to chosen opposing character. Just 1 copy of the Madam Mim. Of course, you've got Queen's Castle, Rabbit, and Goat all kind of competing in that same slot, but it is a nice way to sing And Then Along Came Zeus, that's for sure. And then the other card which is new is the Library. 4 copies of the Library, which I think is great in this deck. Possibly the biggest deal for Amethyst Steel to have access to this card because it is a location with 8 willpower. It only costs 1 to move there, and whenever a character is banished while here, you may draw a card. And with Trenabog's followers, with Magic Brooms, that is just tremendous. But also in a deck where you're playing Foxes, your Foxes can rush in and be banished. You're going to get a lot of card draw off the Library, and it's pretty difficult to deal with, that 8 willpower. And because you're playing Steel, you have the control. Locations are often best when combined with some control aspects. For example, Queen's Castle in Ruby Amethyst is great with Be Prepared. If you can get that Queen's Castle down and then wipe the board, your castle can live to fight another day. And Queen's Castle is also very good, therefore, with things like And Then Along Came Zeus, with Tinkerbells. So I think the Library is a great addition in this deck. There are 2 copies of Tiny Tink, which is definitely a card you guys will know I liked a lot in set 4. I'm not really convinced I would play Tiny Tink in set 5, though. It was really a tech card aimed at dealing with Bucky, because you could shift in Tinkerbell on turn 4. Jobs are good. And having said that, Tiny Tinkerbell, probably a very good card, actually. Certainly a very good card against Hyper Aggro. So maybe I'm eating my words already. And maybe the Tiny Tinkerbell is still going to be a really good option. In fact, I can definitely see it. Even though you've got things like Baboom, Smeeze, you're still going to struggle. And Foxes, the Hyper Aggro gamers, especially if they're going first, and even an Amber Steel Songs deck with aggro tools can get to 20 very, very quickly. So being able to shift in Tink on turn 4, 1 damage to everything to maybe remove a few cards, but moreover then challenge him with that Tinkerbell instantly, removing 2 other threats at once. I can absolutely see the utility of Tiny Tinkerbell the more I think about it, and maybe I would increase the count of this card. In the Emerald Steel meta when I played this deck, I felt like 3 Tinkerbells was the sweet spot. Of course, the other thing to consider with this card is that you can sing friends. And I felt like many, many players massively underestimated this card in the previous set. I obviously posted my video on Amethyst Steel, which performed very well. And I think while a lot of people were playing it before, that did make it a little bit more popular. And a lot of people ended up cutting the Tinkerbell, which I think was a huge mistake. Because this Tiny Tink, even if you play it down on the board, your opponent kind of has to respect the potential shift threat of Tinkerbell, even if you don't have it. And then you can just sing friends. Jobs are good one. So I started off not liking the Tinkerbell. The more I thought about it, actually, it seems like a pretty good addition. Worth noting, someone got top 16 in Bologna with a near net deck of my version of Amethyst Steel. I got to commentate that game. They lost 2-1 to Sapphire Steel, but I almost watched a Specie net deck get a Golden Mickey. That would have been class. They did change like 3 cards. Up next, we have Sapphire Emerald, pardon. Wow, what an interesting start. Sapphire Emerald is a unorthodox color combo. The main focus of this one is going to be playing 1 jump ahead or Tipo on turn 2. So Tipo is like a 1 jump ahead with a body mixed with Fishbone Quill. When you play this character, you may put a card from your hand into your Inkwell face down and exerted. That also includes uninkable cards, by the way. So you're playing 1 jump ahead or Tipo on turn 2, which reliably means you can then play the Flaversham or preferably the Muses, I would imagine, on turn 3, which is a really powerful bit of consistency that you now have with Sapphire decks. The fact that you can consistently get that turn 4 card down on turn 3, then the Muses can kind of just chill on the board, and every time you play a song, then you can bounce back cards into your opponent's hand, and that could be really, really powerful, particularly when you then play a Clarabelle a few turns later, which Clarabelle is a 7-cost inkable character, which at the end of your turn, you can draw cards until you have as many cards as your opponent has. So if you're bouncing cards back to your opponent's hand with the Muses, you're using your welcome on to your opponent's cards as well. This is shuffling chosen character, item, or location into their player's deck. That player draws 2 cards. The Muses and your welcome combine so well with Clarabelle, where when I've been testing Clarabelle on my stream yesterday in a Emerald Steel deck, she often drew me like 5 cards in a single turn, which is absolutely bonkers. And it checks at the end of the turn you play it. So it's not like it's a card that your opponent can remove to deny the ability. You play Clarabelle, if you're at 0 cards, your opponent's at 5, you just draw 5, and there's nothing your opponent can do to stop the power of Clarabelle. So I think your welcome in particular is combining so well with it. And worth mentioning, the Muses can sing your welcome. There's also 3 copies of Remember Who You Are. If chosen opponent has more cards in their hand than you, draw cards until you have the same number. So lots of really interesting card draw tools with this one, which of course combines so well with the Fishbone Quill. We're used to seeing Steel, Sapphire do particularly well because of the power of the card draw Fishbone Quill with a Whole New World. But with Remember Who You Are being inkable in this deck, it becomes a much more reasonable option. With the Clarabelle, with the Muses, there's some really, really spicy things going in with this deck. Also, of course, worth mentioning, the other thing Sapphire Steel has historically done very well is it's the card draw of a Whole New World, which this deck is somewhat replicating with Remember Who You Are and Clarabelle, and then the control of Grab Your Swords, while Emerald also has their own control tool, and that is Under the Sea. Put up all opposing characters with 2 strength or less onto the bottom of their player's deck in any order. Now that doesn't sound... And also your welcome is a great control tool. Mother Knows Best is bouncing cards back to opponent's hand. Mother Gothel, when you play this character, each opponent chooses one of their characters and returns that card to hand. But it's not only 2 cost characters you can hit, or 2 strength characters, because there's also a couple of ice blocks in there. Only 3 Flavershams, 3 Strike a Good Match. Strike a Good Match is definitely a good card with the Muses. It's another way to get rid of uninkables. Bell can also give you some more ramp. During your turn, you may put an additional card from your hand into your Inkwell. 3 Dimes, 2 Tamatoas, 2 Crickeys, and a Judy Hops as well. Wow, what an exciting list. The more I look at this, I am starting to believe a little bit more in Emerald Sapphire. Some of you will know I did play Emerald Sapphire towards the last set with Inkcaster, Hidden Inkcaster, and 36 Uninkables. It was certainly a little bit more on the meme side of things, but it allowed me to play lots of Under the Sea. It allowed me to play Hades and Genie from Emerald, and I had lots of control. And if my deck got going, it seemed pretty good. But it really struggled for card draw. So remember who you are, as well as the Clarabelle and Flaversham. It does seem like this deck, and you're welcome as control. I'm starting to believe maybe in Emerald Sapphire. Let me know if you want me to play an Emerald Sapphire deck. Spoiler alert, I'm going to play Emerald Sapphire whether you want me to or not, because this looks like an awful lot of fun. So big shout out to this anonymous person for inspiring me to try out this color combo once again. Up next we have Amber Emerald. So Amber Emerald is definitely a deck which I've very much got my eye on coming into this set. I haven't played it yet, and the main reason for that is I think it's very, very similar to what we have seen in set 4. So Amber Emerald struggled a lot against Bucky, and that was actually a big reason you never saw me playing it on my channel. I actually recorded a few videos that never got posted with this deck. But this deck, even though it looks like it should be good into the Bucky, a big problem was Hidden Cove, because then you're Under the Sea, just can't remove the Diablos, all of that sort of thing. So one powerful tool that this deck really has is it can utilize Diablo still. Now, this was the only deck really where Diablo saw play, which didn't play Bucky. And a big reason for that is because the ability to sing Bare Necessities. You can play the Diablo on turn 1, you shift in Diablo instantly, possibly on turn 2, because you may as well wait until you can exert the Diablo, right? So on turn 2, you shift in Diablo, you can then sing Bare Necessities, and this is going to allow you to discard things like Brawl and Baboom, which are some of the best options for your opponent to deal with Diablo. Of course, your 1-cost Diablo can allow you to see it. But what's more is your Diablo is also presenting you with a potential threat to sing Under the Sea a little bit earlier. With Ariel being sing a 5 and Diablo being a 3-cost, if you just have this 1-cost Diablo down and an Ariel on the board and nothing else, you are threatening to shift in Diablo, discard an action card to do so, and then sing Under the Sea to wipe your opponent's board in the early game. That is a really, really powerful tool. Of course, Diablo is a great card draw engine as well. Prince John is the other big card draw engine in this one, with lots of discard. Ursa the Deceiver, Sudden Chill, and Bare Necessities can also both be sung by Diablo. Sir Hiss is an interesting one in this deck, which still makes the card only 2 copies of it. I would probably expect to see more copies in more optimized lists. This deck has lots of one-offs, and I'll kind of talk about the one-offs, which I'm not a big fan of. But Sir Hiss is great. Even though it is kind of considered a Diablo answer, that's not really the reason it was played in set 4. The main reason is it's a 2-cost character which can sing things like Sudden Chill and Bare Necessities and not be removed. So on turn 3, let's say you play your Sir Hiss on turn 2, of course. Turn 3, you play Prince John, and then you could sing Bare Necessities or Sudden Chill. Usually if you do that with a 2-cost character, it's going to be getting removed from the board, which you don't want your opponent to be removing their 2-cost characters in favor of yours, because this deck is trying to build up to singing Under the Sea. Sir Hiss can contribute towards singing Under the Sea, and the card which your opponent traded out with Sir Hiss would also be removed by Under the Sea. So the fact that Sir Hiss is an evasive card, it allows you to sing, quest, do all these things in the early game while remaining on the board to then contribute 2 towards that sing together 8, which is pretty difficult to achieve. You can get there with Ariel, Sir Hiss, and a 1-cost character, for example. So Sir Hiss is great in that deck for this reason. It's a good way to sing songs, do some questing, and if worse comes to worse, it's also a good way of dealing with pesky evasives. So there's lots of songs in this deck. There is Painting the Roses Red. This is a card I would expect to see 4 copies of. A lot of the competitive lists actually that we saw at the Lorcana challenges were only playing 3. I would play 4 personally, but most of the top players who have more experience with this deck have been playing 3 copies of this card. Of course, this is probably one of the cards which got cut to kind of fit in some unorthodox cards, maybe like newer cards like Prince John's Mirror and Clarabelle. Prince John's Mirror, I don't think belongs in this deck at all. This is a card which at the end of each opponent's turn, if they have more than 3 cards in their hand, they discard until they have 3. This is like not really making much sense in this deck. I think in a Whole New World deck, it could make sense. Where you're singing a Whole New World, they draw to 8 after a Whole New World, because of course they draw to 7, draw for turn. Then Prince John's Mirror, if you've already got it down on the board, could put in work. Here, though, you'd rather just, instead of having this card, you'd rather just have another discard card. Something like another copy of You Have Forgotten Me, another song card. This is very tight when you're playing Aerial. You want lots of songs. 20 songs give you around an 80% hit rate on Aerial. The more songs you can include, the higher the hit rate. And you've also got a Prince John. You want lots of discard, lots of characters for the sing together. I just don't think you can justify this card. Similarly, the Ursula Deceiver of All, while there's some cute things you can do with Sudden Chill, very occasionally bare necessities, I think you're going to be better off with something else. Ursula's Eric's Bride is an interesting option. I definitely don't hate it as a one-of. Whenever this character quest, chosen opponent reveals their hand and discards a non-character card of your choice. Of course, you can shift this on to Ursula Deceiver. So you can play Ursula Deceiver on 2, Prince John on 3, shift in Ursula, and get some guaranteed draw value off Prince John. That could be nice. You Have Forgotten Me, I think you want more copies of. Your Welcome's an interesting new addition to this deck. Being able to add cards to your opponent's hand and then discard them to control the board. I think that could be really, really powerful. 1 copy of Lucifer, which seems decent. 3 Brunos. There has to be 4 Brunos in this deck. It is a non-negotiable. 4 Kedas. Of course, you can shift in Keda and do some under the sea things. Overall, I think this deck's really, really good. There is definitely some card choices in here which I would say is suboptimal. And there's just a lot of like little tweaks that I would suggest, like Prince John's Mirror should be a 4th Bruno. This Ursula probably should be some more Sahis. This Clarabelle should probably be a Sahis. Obviously, it's release day. People are wanting to test new things. So I don't think it's reasonable to expect fully optimized lists. I do like the Hidden Cove in this deck to protect your Diablo from brawls. I think that's pretty spicy. We saw Bennett do that in Bologna. Overall, I think this is a great deck. And I think you can expect to see a lot of it. I think a big advantage of this deck is the fact that Under the Sea is going to be one of the best ways to deal with these hyper aggro decks. On turn 4, if you've got an Aerial down, plus a 2 and a 1, you can sing Under the Sea. Alternatively, just Aerial and a Diablo can also sing Under the Sea, and that could be really powerful. Up next, we've got a Amber Steel. So Amber Steel looks to be in a really good spot this set. It's one of the better ways of dealing with hyper aggro, and the main reason for that is you've got the Queen, who can shift in on 2 to actually remove a Daisy Duck on turn 2, which is pretty much unheard of. But then you've also got Cinderella that can be singing Storm Rage on Strength. You've got the Grab Your Swords. You just got lots of tools to deal with the hyper aggro decks. And it's also good into other matchups as well. Of course, you've got your Whole New World. You can then go quite wide. You might see some decks having a slightly more aggressive curve. Things like Daisy Duck, Golden Harp in at 1 could be options. Interesting to see Pete in the deck as well. 2 Sleepy's Flutes, 2 Bare Necessities, only 2 Rapunzels. Probably want to play 4 of them, I would imagine. Prince Naveen's a new edition, only 1 copy. They might have only had access to 1 copy. I would imagine 2 to 3 is going to be where people settle. The power of Prince Naveen is that you can just sing a whole new world. Well, not sing, but play a whole new world when you play Prince Naveen. So Prince Naveen is playing a song card from your hand. I think Amber Steel is going to be great. Of course, a big weakness of this deck is it can be shut down pretty heavily by Pete. So it's probably going to have a pretty tricky matchup into Amethyst Steel because this deck can bounce back the Pete multiple times. Up next, we have Sapphire Steel. So Sapphire Steel is still going strong. Got some pretty interesting new additions. In particular, I really like the look of Donald Duck in this deck. It's a 5-cost character, which is inkable. When you play this character, you may put the top card of your deck into your Inkwell face down and exerted. So it's a Mickey Mouse that costs 5, but it's inkable. And I think that's great for a Sapphire Steel deck because the 5 cost mark is a really nice mark because you can play Mickey on 3, and then you can play a 5-cost character on turn 4, and then on turn 5 sing a whole new world, Grab Your Swords. So I think Donald Duck is a great addition to this one. It's also inkable. There's also Simba in the mixer here, son of Mufasa. When you play this character, you may banish chosen item or location. That's a nice way of dealing with items, which this deck sometimes struggled to deal with. Otherwise, we might have seen Beast hard-headed in there, but this is covering you against locations as well. Moreover, like the Queen's Castle, you're no longer having to play Rise of the Titans to deal with that is probably quite nice. 4 copies of Zeus seems like a lot of Zeus. 3 copies of Hades. There is also 4 copies of the new Cheetah card, which is pretty tremendous. It has support. It is uninkable. And during your turn, when you put a card into your inkwell, if it's the second card you put into your inkwell this turn, you may draw a card. So, say you play Cheacher on turn 2. On turn 3, you ink to play Fishbone Quill, and then you use your Fishbone Quill to put another card into your inkwell. That is going to be a second card you've put into your inkwell this turn. So Cheacher will draw you a card. So Cheacher on turn 2 into either Fishbone or Mickey on turn 3 is already going to draw you one card. So she's a very, very powerful tool indeed for Sapphire decks. I think Sapphire Steel looks to be in a pretty good spot. It's a deck which continues to do very, very well with the Fishbone Quill, Whole New World kind of combo. Definitely interested to see if this Sapphire Emerald deck can give it a bit of a run for its money. This certainly looks more unorthodox, and I think it's more likely that this Sapphire Steel deck is going to be more refined because this is very similar to decks we've seen in the past, whereas Emerald Sapphire is something very new. But I think that this is going to be a very strong deck in the metagame. On to the top 3, we've got a Steel Songs deck, and this one looks a little bit more optimized in my opinion. 12 1-drops, which is a lot. That sounds good to me. With a Steel Song deck, you can play a Whole New World and then go very, very wide. So you've got Cinderella, which is a great option if you're looking to control the board on turn 1. You've got Robin Hood or the Queen if you're looking to do some shift shenanigans. Of course, Queen would be also a... Cinderella is a great option when going first, because then you can just sing Storm Rage on, for example, on turn 2. But then if you're going second, the Queen is going to be a great option because you can shift in the Queen on turn 2 to remove a Daisy Duck. So lots of good options. Robin Hood is obviously just Robin Hood. Daisy Duck is some really good questing power. Of course, the downside of this card to add cards into your opponent's hand is completely and utterly negated by the Whole New World. And it's just going to be a great card to put down for 1 cost after you've played a Whole New World as well. 2 Smees, 4 Ursula Vanessas. Vanessa can sing all of the 3-cost songs, but also the Zeus for some control, which of course can deal with those Daisy Ducks. 2 Bare Necessities, also playing 3 copies of Pete Games Referee, which I imagine is going to be very powerful in the mirror matchup. Going to be interesting to see if this card does end up being in these lists. 2 Grab Your Swords, 3 Rapunzels, 4 Queens, and 2 Giant Cinderellas. Looks like a very nice take on the deck. I like it quite a bit. Our next top 2, we've got another Amber Steel Songs, and this is Pavel. Pavel is also on... Wait, this previous deck was 16 1-drops, right? Yeah, 16 1-drops, which is a lot. I think people really underestimate how many 1-drops you can play. So I actually like to see that many 1-drops. I think that's pretty spicy. So this one, Pavel, is on 12 1-drops, but does have a couple of Piglets instead, a couple of Bengers and a couple of Lawrences, which we didn't see in the other list. We also see 2 copies of World's Greatest Criminal Mind, which can, of course, combine with the Queen. Whenever this character quests, chosen opposing character gets -4 strength, and chosen character gets +4 strength. Usually with the Queen, you're going to give your own card +4 strength, but there is the option of giving it to one of your opponent's characters, and therefore World's Greatest Criminal Mind can be a great removal option. Also interesting to see 2 copies of Aerial Sonic Warrior. This is not a card that we really saw in Steel Songs deck in previous metagames. Not sure if there's a particular reason that they've decided to go for it now. I will say if you're playing a Whole New World against a hyper aggro deck, they're going to be able to get lots of threats down on the board. So maybe just having that utility of Aerial being able to remove multiple threats is interesting. No Grab Your Swords in this one, which is also quite interesting. No Robin Hoods either. No Naveen's in either of the Steel Song decks, which is really, really fascinating. Really, really fascinating. Is there even, apart from Daisy, is there anything new in this one? It's only Daisy Duck in this one and Pete in this one. Our next, Amber Emerald took it all down. Isn't that exciting? This one is Terra, who won the whole tournament. Prince Naveen in this one, which I really was not expecting to see Prince Naveen in this deck. That is very, very interesting. So this one has 1 Hidden Cove, 1 Kida. It also plays Rapunzel's Tower, which is chosen characters get +3 willpower while here. So pretty similar to Hidden Cove, but it costs 2 rather than 1, and it gives you extra willpower but no strength. So a Diablo in Rapunzel's Tower is going to have 5 willpower and evasive. That is pretty scary. Only 2 copies of Sir Hiss. As I've mentioned, I do think this is a card you should play more than 2 copies of, if I'm honest. I think it's really good. Then the Naveen is very, very spicy as well. There's not that many songs, right? But there's Sudden Chill, Bare Necessities. I'm going to be honest, guys. I actually don't like the Naveen in this deck. I really don't. Obviously, Terra won the tournament. Guys, bear in mind, I'm being critical of decks. This was a release day event. Probably like 4 days has passed since that. I've been playing set 5 Shimmering Skies for like 7-8 hours every day for the last 3 or 4 days. I have strong opinions on deck building. I'm not always right, but I'm just going to share my honest opinions to try and educate and have this kind of discussion. Obviously, this person's done very well with the deck, but let's be honest, just because a deck has won a tournament on the first weekend of a release doesn't mean that's the optimized build of it. And while I like a lot of the cards in this one, the Naveen, I'm really curious about, and I'm surprised to see. I mean, the value of Naveen is that you can play songs which cost 6 or less for free, right? But this deck, there's only 3 copies of Bruno, 4 You're Welcomes. Is that really what you want to be hitting with an it's uninkable? I just don't think you can justify the uninkable slot in this deck to play this Naveen. I really, really don't see it. It's interesting. I do like the 4 copies of You Have Forgotten Me compared with the other Amber Emerald. Only 3 copies of Bruno is absolutely wild. You have to play 4 copies of this card when you've got an Ariel and a Prince John. You just absolutely have to. But clearly, Amber Emerald looks to be in a really, really good spot. The Cricky, nice to help you deal with locations. That's also a nice addition if you're welcome, as your welcome can deal with locations. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be playing a lot of these decks. I think what you can see is a lot of the decks which have done very well on the opening weekend here are very similar to set 4 decks, which makes sense because people are wanting to play something that they know. They're wanting to play decks which they're familiar with and maybe haven't had time to cook and test, with the exception of this one, which is my favorite deck by far from this first one. Not because it's necessarily optimized, it's the most spicy. You guys know me, I love a spicy deck. So I think the meta is absolutely wide open. I think there's lots of really, really good other decks. I definitely do think that all the decks we've seen here, Amber Emerald, Amber Steel, Sapphire Steel, as well as this Amethyst Steel, I think all of those are really, really top contenders. But I think there's a lot of good unorthodox color combos which we haven't yet discovered, and maybe Sapphire Emerald is one of those. So thank you very much for watching. Big shout out to all those people at Battle Bear. I hope you don't mind me talking about your decks and maybe being a little bit critical, but that's my job. That's what I'm here to do. People want my honest opinions. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. Shout out again to FlexiSpot for sponsoring today's video. Thank you very much for the desk. I absolutely love it. Check that link in the description. See you very soon for more Disney Lorcana Shimmering Skies content. I'm very excited for set 5. It's a lot of fun. Cheers.